Okay, Ms. Evelyn, you have a question? First, let me
Yes.
welcome everybody to this morning, and I hope your night was peaceful and uneventful. So here we are. Go ahead, Evelyn.
Okay, you laid the foundation, everything on promise and the promises of God, some of the promises. So is it us who say that God promised this? Is it us that say that? Or we who say that this is what God has promised you, Evelyn, or whoever?
I got you.
Because what God says will be regardless, so that's my question.
It will be for me, but it might not be for you in your lifetime. Because if you don't follow the pathway, the promise is not yours in your lifetime. You won't experience it. Got me?
I got you. So again, I need to make sure I'm clear. So let me ask this question again. So, for instance, like Pastor Richard say, this is Evelyn, this is what I'm going to do for you, yada, yada, yada. I said, okay, Pastor, thank you. And is it me who put the label promise? This is what Pastor promised me. Is it me who put that on what you said that you're going to do for me?
Yes.
That's how I see it.
Yes. You are the one who said that it's a promise, but to me it is also one. I just didn't use that word, but it's the same thing because you have expectations.
That's what okay, now I got the clarity. I got full clarity on that now. Okay.
Now, keep in mind that one of the things that may be a bit confusing with some people when you begin to understand who you are is when we talk about Elohim making promises to us, made a promise to us, and then we are Elohim, then how do you square that circle? How is it that both of those things are correct? How is that?
Is that rhetorical, or are you just asking that?
Yes, rhetorical. Unless you know the answer to it.
I'm trying to follow you, so ask that question again.
If I tell you that you're Elohim, and I am, and I say that Elohim made promises to us, made a promise to us, then how is it that I'm Elohim and Elohim made a promise and I'm not the one who made the promise? How can that be true? That's the question. The way it is true is because Elohim created us to be Elohim. And the promise that Elohim gave when Elohim created us is that we would have the same consciousness, the same awareness of self and everything else as Elohim does. And Elohim says to us, this is how you walk into that consciousness. This is how you become aware of who you are. And when you become aware of who you are, then you are as I am, meaning that you are Elohim also. Now this is the marker here, and please hold on to this. When I become, and I'm going to use me for an example, when I become Elohim, in terms of my embracing who I am, my acting, and the way that Elohim is acting, I portray all the attributes of Elohim. Now I am Elohim below, as there is Elohim above. Can you see that?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, when I am Elohim below, having a physical experience in a thing called a body, when Elohim is embodied in this physical form, Elohim is a human. It is in human form. So it is, embodied in physical form. So it becomes a human. And that's one of the reasons Jesus could say, Who did they say I, the human, is? Because he was, in every regard, the personification of his creator. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
So when
Yes.
that happens, and when that happens, and mankind is able to embrace who it is and balance is in the earth, and we talk about as above, so is below, that cannot happen without the human, without the physical being becoming human, which is the personification of Elohim in bodily form. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any questions about that or comments?
So when the church tell you we should hold God to what he said he's going to do, I don't know if anybody has heard this. They're saying that, to me, it's like you pouting. God, you said that you was going to do this, and you said you was going to do that. To me, that's disrespectful.
Well,
But
I agree, Evelyn, but keep in mind, Evelyn, that we are told to remind God of his promises, right?
right.
So I want you to tell me something. When is the last time God forgot something that you had to remind him of? If he is all-knowing, then it is impossible for him to forget something, isn't it? So
Yeah.
that is just a simple cliche that's used to excite people. It has no power to it whatsoever. And anything that we do, be it trying to, hold him to his promises or saying something as disrespectful or distasteful as that, but not only that, it is also irreverent to go through the rituals that we go through in our church settings. It is disrespectful for us to relegate people in that in our groups. It's not relegate. That's a bad word. It is disrespectful for us to tell people that in order for them to be in good standing with God, they have to take communion, they have to be baptized. And these physical rituals are not the doorway to who we are. Now, having said that, do not forget that these physical rituals are the things that point to a spiritual reality. When we treat these rituals as though they are the method or they are the only way to get a relationship with someone we already related to, then we are being totally disrespectful and irreverent to our Creator. These things were left intact for the purpose of pointing us to a spiritual reality. What is that spiritual reality? The idea of baptism is a physical ritual that points us to a spiritual baptism, and that spiritual baptism is the baptism of the Spirit, meaning that we become so immersed in spiritual desire and understanding until we become that Spirit, or we become aware that that's who we are. The idea of is a physical ritual, points us to a spiritual place. That spiritual place is when you mute your phone, please. When you mute your phone, make sure your phones are muted, please. Thank you. Communion leads us, points us to a spiritual communing with our Creator, meaning understanding that communion is simply a physical avenue that guides us to a place of awareness so that we understand that we are in continuous communion with our Creator. And those physical attributes become disrespectful and irreverent when we label them as being the holiness of God, or when we label them as being a pathway to something called heaven. They are not a pathway to a destination of heaven after we exit our bodies. They are a landmark that guides us to a spiritual truth, which is enlightenment. And the greatest enlightenment that anyone could ever hope for or ever receive is being enlightened as to who they are. And I'm not talking about through lip service. I'm talking about being enlightened as to who they are in every respect of enlightenment, to the extent that we are able to commune with a room in such a manner that we can teach, we can live, we can have our being as did Jesus when he embodied, when he was embodied in this earth. So right now, where we are is shedding ourselves of these physical rituals in order for us to be totally spiritual. This is a task that is not done in a physical way. However, it can be observed physically, meaning the observation of where we are spiritually is seen in how we interact with each other and how we act when no one else is looking. Does that help you?
Yes. Yes.
Any questions?
Pastor, I have a question. Good morning. This is Kathy. On the heels of what Evelyn just asked, and I think, and I understand what you're saying about the rituals that we're moving away from, and I agree wholeheartedly. And I was questioning whether we got into that mode of the rituals of thinking that we are reminding God of the promises, because it's in the scriptures. I don't know where. It's like in Leviticus or somewhere where they're told to remind their children of the word of God and the promises of God by tying it was something you tied to your head and you put it on your belt buckle, the scriptures written on paper or something. You tied it somewhere, and it was a symbol of the remembrance as the promises to you. So I guess my question becomes now, we know that was the ritual that they were told to observe. Was it to remind God of the promises, or was it to remind ourselves that we are in covenant and these promises are already mine?
The scripture, the words that you're speaking of, there are places in the scripture, not just one. One, what you're speaking of is where it talks about, it's a type of ritual where you put the scripture in something like a sack and put it tied around your neck, and you carry it on your breast. Another one is place these stones so that your children will know we pass this way. All of those things are landmarks for the purpose of teaching. It is not for the purpose of worshiping. And what I mean by that is this. It says remind our children, not God. We are to teach our offspring. We are to teach each generation who they are. And when we do that, each generation will become more and more aware of who they are. And when that happens, there is a greater degree of balance and unicity between what is above and what is below. And when we speak of what is above and below, we're not talking about geographical locations. We are talking about the elevated awareness of enlightenment. So the elevated awareness of enlightenment is what we speak of when we speak of above. And below is when we are speaking of our desire to attain that higher awareness of enlightenment. And this is what we are to remind our offspring of. Regardless of where we are in our understanding, there is always something else to be understood. Is that in line with what you're asking?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone else? And I'm very much.
This is Charles. I was going to ask the same thing Kathy asked because, like you said, Rep, how you going to remind God of something He said? He already knows. That right to me, it was it was reminding us of His promises to us.
And Charles, you're right. Now understand something to all of you. I taught that. I have taught that we are to remind God of His promises. I did that out of ignorance. And I do not believe that we should ever enter a state of denial of where we were at one time. Why? Because there are those who are following a pathway in search of enlightenment. And when we get so caught up on where we are in terms of what we think we know, to the extent that we are in denial about where we were, then our lives become a living lie. Our desire becomes phony, and our speech becomes powerless. Our words carry no power at that point. We must always remember where we came from. And when we remember that we came out of the throes of ignorance into the light, it gives others the encouragement, it gives them the strength to persevere in their endeavor to move from that darkness into light as well. And that is the reason we are never supposed to talk down to anyone based upon what we think we know. Neither are we to talk to anyone in terms that they don't understand and then be unwilling to answer a question or to make them feel uncomfortable or inferior because they don't understand what we are talking about. The environment of collective understanding and desire must always be paramount. Everyone must be looked upon as being who we were when we were in that place. Why? Because until all of us have a desire to be enlightened or to live on the mountaintop of enlightenment, none of us can establish a residence there. It is imperative that each of us understand that each of us is indeed all of us. Does that make sense? Questions or comments?
Hey, Red, it's Charles again. It was just like what you're saying. It's just like when Cain was bringing his offering to the Father. I mean, the Father didn't made him feel guilty of what he was doing, but what he was doing was wrong. He was saying, Cain, if you do better, if you do good, he would have the same thing as his brother Abel was having. But Cain wouldn't listen.
I suppose we have been looking at that in a way that we should not have. Suppose that if we were to revisit that story of Cain and Abel, suppose looking at it, we will find something different there. Maybe the thing that we will find there is that both of them were wrong. Could it not be that Abel's arrogance in face of Cain's offering could very well be the source of the conflict between the two. So don't want to get into the weeds on that, but I do want to offer that question or take that under consideration when we speak in regards to that, because the story of Cain and Abel is no different than any others that we've been taught. Everything that we have been taught, we must look at it again through fresh eyes. Not only that, but everything that we have taught, we must revisit. And I'm not talking about the things that we taught when we were in church settings. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about even the things we taught yesterday. We must look at it with fresh eyes. Why? Because every time we examine the cloth of truth, we find a new needle point in it that we did not see before. And it does not make the first needle point that we saw wrong. It simply means that we're seeing more, or we're seeing a clearer story, and we're seeing a deeper truth that's embedded in the story that seems to be a parable of two brothers. When in actuality, it is a description of an avoidable personality that can lead to one believing that they are indeed better than someone who has a different thing to offer than they do. A story that speaks to the idea of not being puffed up because of what you're able to offer or able to give or what you think you understand, but always being level-headed and willing to bring someone else to a place of understanding. Why? Because in your seeking to bring someone else to a place of understanding, what you will find more times than not is that question or that person who you are trying to help understand, brings up into a place of understanding, they are the one who's giving you a greater degree of understanding by virtue of their questions or by virtue of your trying to explain something to them. Because the things that you're explaining to them are things that you did not know before they raised a question about them. Any comments or questions about this? I hope it's clear. And yesterday we did a hour 2 hours Q&A, and if that's where we are, that's where we are. Even today, we move with the flow of the spiritual concerns, and that is the only way that we can move in the spirit and to embrace the essence of what truth is. Why? Because we are not the determining factor in what we teach. Who determines that is the universe. It is the universe that guides us. And the guidance of the universe is not necessarily through what we read or what we have read the day, the night, or the week before, even what we think we want to teach today. The guidance of the universe comes on the basis of who is in hearing distance of our voices and what humanity at large needs to be placed in the macro, the energy of the words, the power of the questions, so that truth can be brought brought in the midst of humanity. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Makes sense to me.
Yes. And it really resonates with me, Pastor, because we've been talking about duality, and the Bible is the story of us, and we have all those voices within us, and Cain and Abel are just simply two voices of one, because we are all one. And so, as we learn that there is no right or wrong in terms of a continuum, there is something from both of those stories, like the Leah and Rachel story. There's something from both of those aspects that we can learn something from.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up about duality, Barbara, because what I'm going to do, I've been debating this for the last 48 hours as to whether or not I'm going to send something out on duality, and I'm going to do that. If we don't get to it today, if we don't discuss it today, I'm going to send it out, because when you the idea of duality in conjunction with understanding what a continuum is, I think I see something there, and when we talk about the unicity of our existence, to me it's no difference than the vapor or the steam that flows through a glass pipe, and when it gets to a certain place in that pipe, it condenses into water, and it does not cease to be what it was from its beginning. It's just a condensing of what it is since its beginning, but it does not interrupt the continuum, or it does not interrupt the journey that it travels. It remains the same, and even with it becoming steam again, after it becomes water, and at the next end of its next spot or place in space or in time, it becomes ice. It is still the same thing, and you could not have the ice or the water without having the vapor in the beginning, or the steam in the beginning. So what I'm saying in essence is this: if we look at water, it appears as though it is duality, because it's H2O, two hydrogen molecules and atoms, and one oxygen. However, if you separate the two, if you see that as being duality, then you will never get water. So it's the idea of the two becoming one, and the Creator gave us this principle of duality, not because it is something that is truly spiritual in nature. He gave us a sense of duality in order for us to be able to understand the essence of our unicity with it, the Creator. So that's something I would love to explore in greater detail at a later date. So anyway, thanks. Any other questions or comments?
Good morning. This is Audrey. I was just thinking that, getting back to what Evelyn asked about the promises, and Ron sent this little paragraph this morning. It's exactly what that little paragraph is talking about. The promises don't come true until we become unified with the Creator. When we as Elohim become in unity with the all Elohim. So as long as we live in duality, we get distracted. So it's not God who needs to be reminded of promises. It's we who need to be reminded of who we are, so that we can exist in those promises. So we have to unite with the all unity.
Yes, ma'am. You're right. And one of the things that I would suggest very strongly that we make every effort to abandon, and that is the thought that God has promised us wealth and God has promised us all of these things, when in essence, God has promised you that you can know who you are, period. that is the thing that we seek ye first, the kingdom of God. We seek to understand who we are and embrace it, and everything else will be added. Meaning that we need to abandon these thoughts and ideas. Well, God, I want you to give me a house. Or, God, I thank you for giving me this job. That kind of thing. That is not the promise. The promise is knowledge of who you are, knowledge of self in relationship to knowledge of Creator. And you find out that you and Creator are the same. And in doing that, and while you are traveling that journey, it is incumbent upon the one who gave you opportunity to embody this flesh. It is incumbent upon that one to make sure that everything that is needed for your survival in this realm is provided. And as those provisions are being made, and we become more and more aware of who we are, that we begin then to become less attached to the materialism in this earth. And the greater the detachment is to the materialism in this earth, the more divine we become. Why do I say that? Because the more we are attached to the material in this earth, the more we become one with it. And when we become one with the material in this earth, then the materialism in this earth becomes our God, because the only thing that we are to be one with is our Creator, our Sustainer, the source of our wisdom and life. And so if we are attached to materialism, then that means that we see this materialism as being the source and the sustainer of our life and our essence, when really it isn't. And that is where so much unhappiness and discontentment comes from. It is in that place of desiring to be one with the material world. That attitude is the source of 99% of all of the agonies that we endure as we travel in this journey in this earth. So we make a choice. We can travel a journey that leads us to a place of material worship, or we can travel the journey that leads us to the place of spiritual worship, submitting to the spiritual or submitting to the material. Those are our choices. And none of us have the authority or should even think that we have the authority to force or to manipulate anyone into abandoning their material journey for a spiritual journey. It is simply our responsibility to be who we are, respond to questions that are raised, and in conversation, seed the conversation with truth, but never with manipulation or force. Do you understand that? Can you see that? Any questions or comments about that?
I do have a question, Pastor. Have we somehow lost sight of, I know we've lost sight of spirituality and the spiritual things, but have we somehow mixed up blessings and promises? Because I've heard evangelical preachers preach the scripture that talks about you're blessed when you come, you're blessed when you go, you're blessed in the city and the fields, the blessings of God will overtake you. And when they're saying those things, they're equating those, of course, to physical things. But blessings and promises, do we use them interchangeably, or are we just way off base when people are saying those things? Have we just missed the mark totally?
Well, I think we missed the mark totally, not because we sought to miss it, but I do believe that the conflation of blessings and promises has been one of the stumbling blocks in understanding spirituality for eons. Excuse me. And again, I've taught this, so many of us on this phone here, because that's what we were taught. The conflation of blessings and promises is seen when we are told that God has promised to bless us with all of these things. And that is contrary to what Jesus taught. So when we look into the scriptures of antiquity, and we begin to see what the priests wrote in places like Leviticus and Deuteronomy, some of the things they wrote, yes, spot on. Some of the things that they wrote are not spot on. If these blessings are to be material in nature, then why is it that Jesus said to us that we are to seek the kingdom and the righteousness above everything else, and all of these other material things that are needed for survival will be added? If these are the blessings, then what happens to the greater blessing, or the blessing of all, which is to know yourself, know who you are, know that you are Elohim having a physical experience. Know that when Elohim is embodied in flesh, it becomes human. Or the goal of that embodiment is for that entity to become human. So, having said all of that, we have been led astray in our understanding of blessings and promise. And again, I want to reiterate, beyond any promise that's ever been made, there's only one promise that matters, and that is to know who you are. Because the seeking of knowledge of self leads one to see that it is no different than the one who created it. Because the one who created it said emphatically that you are created in my image. So the attributes, the essence, are the same. And that is the greatest blessing. That is the one thing of blessing that everyone should desire beyond anything else. Why? Because embracing that begins to attract everything else. You don't need a house. A house needs you. You can live in the street on a tent under a bridge and still survive. But if you don't live in that house, it will deteriorate. If no one enters it, it deteriorates. So it needs you. Things need you. And because things need you, you're seeking who you are. Those things look for you. And when they find you, it is for you to survive in this earth, but also for you to be an assistant to others surviving in this earth. And when you give to others for their survival, it's not that you're blessing them as much as that you are sharing with them from your abundance. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Anyone? Thank you. Anyone else?
So, this is me, Evelyn, again. I don't know if I missed it because I had to step away. So, the promises of God is to know who I am. Am I correct with that?
I take the S off of it, Evelyn. Instead of saying promises, it's simply a promise.
Okay.
I promise you that you're going to know who you are if you follow these guidelines.
Okay. So instead of telling God what he done said and everything, can I just say, because I'm getting this right for me, and I know if I'm getting it right for me, it's for mankind. So can I say that I don't know. Never mind. Well, I don't know what I want to say.
Evelyn, well, I wanted to say something in regards to promise, and maybe this will answer, if not help you ask the question. When we think about promise as it relates to God's promise, we think about it, I'm saying traditionally, in terms of something that is to happen or something that is to come to fruition in the future, but is not necessarily the case right now, as if we're waiting on it. And I think I didn't give the best example yesterday. I can't even recall what it was. But when we think about promise, if you think about a sheet of paper, and if God's promise already exists, and it existed with the creation, so it is not that God at all has to be reminded of the promise. So, for example, going back to the sheet of paper, if you fold, or if anyone folds a sheet of paper in the correct way, I promise you, or it's the promise, for example, that that sheet of paper can be folded into a paper airplane, and that piece of paper will fly in the air when it's in the form of a paper airplane. In the same way, it would be as if we are, and not you, but I'm just saying in general, we're telling God, okay, God, you told me that this paper can fly in the form of a paper airplane. It still can, and that is already done. It's just a matter of us actually doing it. So the idea of God having to be reminded of anything is not the case, because what he promised, in a sense, is already done and always was done and will always be done. It is completely timeless. So with that being said, as it relates to us, it is incumbent upon us to find our way to know who and what we are. We are already that thing. It is just a matter of us becoming consciously aware that we are that thing.
So right now, thank you so much, Sheldon, because what you said makes a lot of sense. But when you started talking, I'm close to the phone, and I'm looking at the board that Pastor and Barbara and everybody else have written on, and I'm looking at what Nick wrote on here. There's no telling how long ago. Set the direction of your intent, then just be. And if that's my desire to commune with the Creator or Abwoon, and just set my intent and just be, just desire.
Yes, and that,
I'm done.
I was going to say yes, and only that desire that you just said, the desire to understand who and what you are, and to be in union or be one with the Creator. That opens up the experiences and everything else that encompasses what it is that we are talking about. And the other thing, or the many things actually, to set the direction of your intent and just be. But when we set the direction of our intent, so follows how close or how far away we actually get from realizing or understanding that, having that awareness that we're actually talking about. So earlier today, we were talking about rituals. Those particular rituals, if you only begin to focus on the physical aspect of them, and it is no longer concentrated or passed on with the rituals, the transformation that is actually supposed to take place, then something becomes just practice, and you get further and further away from what those rituals were intended to more so to do, because the rituals themselves, in a sense, were not the actual goal, or were not the actual prize. The rituals themselves were only a tool used to take us to a certain place to have a certain type of experience. I'm finished. Pastor Richard, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
What makes you think I was speaking? I was waiting on you. How do you know I wasn't?
I figured you wouldn't, but I was being smart to tell you that we couldn't hear you because you weren't talking.
Thank to both of you. as I said while I was on mute, for the question and the response. Are there any other questions or comments? Any thoughts about where we are in terms of our discussion today, yesterday, or whenever?
What Sheldon, this is Barbara, what Sheldon said as he explained the concept of the paper being a paper, but the paper can be anything that can be imagined for it to be. But if we think of it only as the construct of a paper in the concrete form, that it always will be just what we see, not what our thoughts can make it be. So as he thought about that, I thought about the example that you gave of water and ice and steam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All are forms that can be used. If it were not for the ice, given the environment of coldness that in some parts of the world is needed, people couldn't make their house because they make their house out of ice. And so that ice provides the shelter and protection that they need. Yet in another part of the world, what is not needed is the ice. It could be the rain. But if you provide the rain in the environment of the ice, and you provide enough of it, it melts all of it, or it can melt a great deal of it. Therefore, you don't have the protection of the. In a roundabout way, what I am saying is that what Sheldon described is ripeness to me. That there is nothing that is bad or good per se. It's the ripeness of it, and does it provide what is needed, given what the circumstances are at any point. Our geographic area, or anyway, does it provide what is needed when it's needed, how it's needed?
And Barbara, as you were speaking, what that says to me is that every single example that you've given or that has been given speaks to the different forms that energy takes in order for it to perform what it was sent to perform. In other words, bread cast upon the water will not return void. So it is accomplishing the goals for which it has been created. And where there are different needs, the same energy takes the form to answer that need. And that is the reason we are told that the birds do not gather in barns. And we are told that neither are we to take concerns about where we will live, because in reality, if we stay focused on this journey of understanding who we are, then that paper will take the form that would grant us everything that's needed to sustain us. And it's simply, that paper is simply energy. And the origami of it is it taking the form that's necessary for survival. Does that make sense?
So then, once I know who I am and what I was created to be, one with the Father, one with Abun, then the energy taking the form of what is needed as it's needed is almost like the concept of the blessing overtaking me. Meaning, when I concentrate on who I am, I don't worry about like the birds, where they're gonna nest, et cetera, et cetera. It just whatever I need just is.
Precisely. Anyone else?
I had another thought about the paper as well. Um, if we could use our imagination and imagine ourselves as the piece of paper, and as Ms. Barbara used the idea of just thinking of the piece of paper as a piece of paper and not having like many different use, but just that plain, flat, sheet of paper. I'm imagining a white one in my head. Uh, but the other thing is, through when we talk
Why I
about,
gotta be white?
because that's what they made me write on all the time in school.
Quite
but
the
no, that's why I wasn't being smart. That's why I was thinking of a white sheet of paper. But um, when we think about that piece of paper, and we think about the idea of actually knowing who we are and knowing ourselves, the idea of if we were a piece of paper and folding ourselves in different ways and trying, et cetera, and allowing us to be something besides that piece of paper, in that becomes a different type of learning and awareness that's actually taking place in terms of the architecture and the physical shape of the piece of paper, how aerodynamics works and things of that particular nature. So the idea of going through that process of even folding a piece of paper or learning how to fold a piece of paper in a way to make a paper airplane, there's all this additional understanding and experience that actually goes into it. And yet, in the same way, when we talk about all the things that we go through, and then when we talked about, I think a few weeks ago, about this, not the idea of us being punished by anything that we're actually going through, or specifically, actually, I just remember we were talking about the Israelites in the wilderness. It is the idea of being out in that wilderness where this transformation is allowing to take place. So if you think about it, when they were in Egypt, they were forced to no longer only see themselves as a sheet of paper. They were forced that idea of just seeing myself as this or that was torn down, where it was made impossible for them to hold on to that idea of themselves, and they had to begin to see themselves as something else. Of course, they struggled through that process, and in a sense, losing themselves and trying to find themselves. But that was something that was actually required for them to go to the next stage of understanding, the next stage of awareness. I'm finished.
Anyone else?
Pastor, one more thing, and I'm done.
No, you're not, baby. Don't do yourself like that.
And I'm not trying to hog the line, but I saw something while Sheldon was talking, and y'all correct me.
Evelyn, stop 1 second, please. You're not hogging the line. You are obligated to everyone on this line to raise the questions that you are shown, because every one of us benefit from every question that's asked and every response that's given. Now, continue, ma'am.
Okay, while Sheldon was talking, I saw that I don't need anyone to tell me that my job at work, it automatically happens. I know what to do. I've grown into doing what I do on a daily basis. As far as being a mother, no one had to tell me what to do. I grew into that. Things started just, I can't explain what I'm seeing. But when we get to the point when we know who we are, or no one will have to tell us what to do. It comes upon us, or it makes itself aware, or it makes us aware of. I can't put it in words, but I just see what I'm trying to say. I can't explain it.
I understand what you're saying, dear. Well, at what point did you become mature? At what point did you become a mother? At what point, when you gave birth, that didn't mean you became a mother. At that point, you birthed a child. The events in your life that are spiritual, the events in your life that are the most important, are those events that you cannot put a born-on date on. You simply see it retrospectively. And when you look at it retrospectively, you don't see when it's with the beginning of it. Is that it, Evelyn?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And it's just so clear to me now.
Terrific. This is Sukkot, the Jewish holiday, Hebrew holiday Sukkot, Sukkot. The starts on Monday, and it is a period of enlightenment where an abundance of energy from the universe bombards this realm for the purpose of heaven being observed in this earth realm, or enlightenment being observed in the earth realm. So it doesn't surprise me how clear things are becoming. Just a tidbit. Anyone else?
Yeah, as Evelyn talked, I thought about the fact that it's the experience that moves you to where you need to be. You have to experience the thing. When I became a nurse, on July 30th, I was just me. On July 31st, when I got my test score saying, okay, now you're an RN, that didn't make me an RN overnight. And I had to learn, as Evelyn intimated, I had to learn where over time I got to the point where I could walk on the floor and hear people breathing. I said, okay, so-and-so is getting ready to get in some problems. As a new nurse, I couldn't do that. So it's, from a spiritual perspective, it is the experiencing of things that help us, that push us toward that awareness. And the issue is, it's not only the things that we perceive as good, it's all of the things that happen in our lives. There's some things that have happened in my life that I thought was bad. But on retrospect, once I look back, I see that, wow, that was part of the seed that pushed me to experiencing what I experience it now as Elohim, which would not have happened had I not been able to reflect back on it. And so it is the experiences of things, whatever they are, all of them, no judgment, just all of them, that provide what we need to continue to this growth and awareness of what we are. Done.
Thank you for that example. I'm sure, Evelyn, that it makes it even clearer, doesn't it?
Yes, Barbara Jean. Thank you.
Well, I could give you your mama degree, but it's too late. You already know everything.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. I was talking about prayer, and I know we had talked about prayer before. I just want to know, do you pray for anything? Because I know you don't pray and ask for anything. And mostly when I'm saying myself, I don't pray unless I have to feel it or sense it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
And sometimes I don't have no feeling to pray for anything.
Okay. Any of you guys want to address what Charles just raised? Don't everybody speak at once. Just take turns.
Pastor, hello. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, from what I remember, you taught us is we we're constantly in a state of prayer. We're not. It's not prayer. It's more than just not just us getting on our knees in prayer or bowing our heads in prayer. You're saying it. I remember you teaching that it's just a constant communication between us and God. So when Charles mentioning that he may not feel like praying, it maybe it's it maybe it's not he don't feel it. So if he don't feel it, I mean, it's nothing. I don't think there's anything. It's probably that's not necessary. But I mean, if he feel like praying, I mean, it's not like he, like I said, for him to, if he something we need to pray about, it's not that we need to stop what we're doing, close our eyes and bow our heads and Heavenly Father, dear Heavenly Father, this, that, and the third. I remember, from what I remember, you saying it's a constant flow of communication between us and God. We could be riding down the road and pray, or just just something that comes over our mind, something we think about. Now, is that what part of what prayer is from what I remember being taught?
It's not just a part of the mind. It's all of it. It's a state of being. It's a state of being. And I want to get from Ron before I even go any further, okay? Is that okay, Lamont?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Ron.
I agree with what Lamont said, Pastor. I also noticed in the last several years that my methods or my prayers have evolved, whereas it's more community now than it ever has been, and it's also a lot easier now than it ever has been. For example, usually if it's a personal thing, it is usually something that I have also attached to worry to, and I go into prayer in need or in want of something, and that is always, without recognizing or knowing at the time, has been more taxing, I guess. And now the prayer, you almost feel it and know automatically that this is something that you go into meditation on, and it's almost just an automatic thing. It's not something that you have to gear your mind towards to do. It's just there. So and as Lamont said, it's a continuous thing. It's just being alert and being aware of it and tuning in, being there for it. If that makes sense.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. When Charles was talking in Lamont, there was something came to mind. We are taught, have been taught to pray about things, to pray for things, to pray before we go to bed, so that as we lay down and sleep, if we die before we awake, we give him our soul to take. That kind of a thing. So that is still praying for something. When we are, based upon how we've been taught, when we sense the desire or urge to pray, it's usually out of need or want. And that translates into something that is not spiritually healthy. It translates into a belief that there is a lack in our lives. Even when we pray for the removal of injustice from the land, we are asking for something to be removed that we have been brought into this earth to move. The removal of injustice in the land has translated, the way we've been taught, has translated into a change in government or a change in personnel. However, when we are in a meditative state, the removal of injustice in the land speaks to the concept of removing the principle of injustice from the consciousness of humanity, as opposed to a transition in government or the personnel of a governmental agency. It also translates into removing the concept of a belief of lack and injustice from the religious realm as well, which in essence removes the power of the energy of injustice and grants the privilege of being a part of justice for everyone, to everyone. So our transformation in understanding that prayer is a meditative state that is continuous, and that this continuous state of meditation, even when we are not conscious of what's happening, when we hear of an injustice, we don't resort to our political means of removing them or our religious desires for them to be removed. We consciously or subconsciously understand that the concept must be ripened so that it can become what it was supposed to be from the beginning, and that is justice. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So Charles, I guess out of all that's been said, and to the rest of us, of course, this concept of prayer, I think that when we use that word now, prayer, for the most part, we understand that it is not the multiplying of words. We understand that it is being in a meditative state. We understand that. I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. This morning, after I had gotten up, I noticed that the muscles on the left side of my neck and my shoulder were tightening, and they were painful. And the first thing I asked is, okay, what is the source of stress, if there is any? And I could not locate, find any source for that. So what happened is I actually went into a conscious meditative state, meaning that I purposely went into a meditative state to remove the essence of that stress. And what I did was, in doing that, I spoke, but not verbally, but internally. I am not this body. I am living in this body. And because this body is mine, it responds to me. And there is no stress. And I simply breathe. I start breathing with no thoughts. Just cleared my head from everything. And in minutes, it was gone. So it is in that regard that I see being in a conscious meditative state. The unconscious meditative state that's just as effective is when there are things that are happening in someone's life, or even yours, and someone asks you if you would pray for them or if you would intervene on their behalf, and you say sure, and your heart's desire is to do that, and you can go on about your day and never think about it again. But because you are in a continuous meditative state, the energy of your desire to bring relief to that circumstance or situation happens. It takes place. It becomes a reality. And that person calls you and say, thank you for doing what you do. That's what I see as an unconscious meditative state that's just as effective of a conscious meditative state, and sometimes more effective, because when you are in an unconscious meditative state, you don't have to clear your mind purposely in order to get a result or in order to enter that place of peace and balance. Any questions or comments about that, or is that clear, or does that make sense?
It clearly makes sense.
Thank you, Charles. Anyone else want to respond to that, or I raise a question about it?
No, just a quick question about could you elaborate on unconscious versus conscious meditative state?
Yes, ma'am. When I speak of a conscious meditative state, I think that we're pretty much aware that that is when we seclude ourselves and clear our minds purposely, and we begin to shift our focus from the events of our lives to wherever the universe guides us. The unconscious meditative state is when my desire is already known to the universe, and I am going about my daily tasks, whatever they are, and there is a drawing, there's a pulling on me. There is let's say that you, Audrey, are experiencing some discontentment, and there are things going on in your life or at your workplace, whatever, and I flash in your mind. During that period, what you're actually doing is drawing on my energy, and because I am in a constant state of meditation, I am not consciously aware of who is drawing or what's happening in your life, yet you can find relief from that because I have put myself in a state of openness that meditative, that while I am unconsciously in that state, I am open for you to draw from me. And that being the case, when we all make a decision to be in a state of meditation continuously, be it consciously or unconsciously, it is at that point that we become the vessels that others draw on, but just as important, that each one of us are able to gain strength from the energy of each other. Does that help what you're asking, Evelyn? I'm not Evelyn, Audrey.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Hey, Reb, one more thing. What view, how you pray, go into yourself, praying forgiveness of yourself, and trying to pray forgiveness to someone else?
You don't pray for forgiveness for someone else, you forgive. See, if you have to ask for forgiveness, there is a space between that forgiveness and the asking. However, if you are in a constant state of meditation, whatever is necessary appears. When forgiveness is necessary, it appears. When Chauvin kneeled on George Floyd's neck, the idea of having to pray for forgiveness for what he did means that between your praying for that forgiveness and it actually happened, you were in an emotional state of anger, or you were in a barren land between anger and discontentment about what happened. However, if you are in a constant meditative state, you see that happen, and immediately he's forgiven, even though it is a horrendous thing that he is doing. No differently than someone said when the guy stomped the lady to death in front of her family, her mom, they were able to forgive immediately. That's because they're in that constant meditative state, and you don't have to process through emotions in order to do that. So it is not a giving of forgiveness or a giving of mercy as much as it is accessible when it is needed at that point, or when it is called for at that point. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Is that clear, guys?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Meditation. The prayer to me is knowing that everything that would ever be, everything, has already happened in our womb. Everything. We said that it created everything, and then that was it. Everything has already happened. All of the possibilities, all of the potential, everything. So when we remain in an open state, meditative state, which is simply attachment or attaching to a womb, or just remaining in a womb, we whatever happens externally, we are okay, because we understand that as long as we are in that state, we open all of those possibilities for whatever has occurred to transfer or to come and go in us. Meaning, I don't have to hold grudge. I don't have to love my enemy within myself only. If you understand what I'm saying, I don't have to do it out of my own limited capacity. Everything, as long as I am in a womb, and a womb is in me, flows as I need it when I need it. And it's easy. It's an easy thing to say, but it's only as we have these experiences that we continue to grow in our certainty that whatever happens is okay.
And we shouldn't beat ourselves up because we have to process through emotions to get there. If you have to process through emotions, it's okay as long as you get there, because your desire is so pure. The day will come when you won't have to process in order to get there. You just be there. Isn't that part of what you were saying, Barb?
Yes.
See, it's like...
And that doesn't mean I'm there yet all the time, but I'm beginning to experience the concept and the knowing of that.
It's like the centurion approaches Jesus and says, my son and my daughter's dead or dying or whatever. And he says, you don't have to come to my house. All you have to do is speak the word. What are you talking about? All you have to do is speak the word, because you're in a constant state of meditation. You don't have to become one with a broom. You're already that. There's no difference between you and a broom. You are the condensing of a broom in this body. So all you have to do is just speak to it. It's done. What do you mean? Just say it's done. And Jesus says, okay. Nowhere in Israel have I found such faith. He didn't even say rise up. Nowhere in Israel. He has acquiesced to the request, and it was done. That is no different than forgiveness, mercy, any of that. No different. All of it is the same. It's an acquiescence to the desire for wholeness. When the lady with the issue of blood, wholeness, not just healing the problem, the problem as it presents itself, but it's wholeness. And wholeness is far greater than healing. Healing closes a wound. It closes a wound on your leg or your body. It eases a pain. It removes an object from that's not supposed to be in your body. It takes cancer cells and brings them back to life so that they won't die and become a tumor. Wholeness is about being restored to what you were in your original state of being. The cells were never there. They never died. It is a sense of knowing that everything that presents itself in this earth realm is a distraction, is an illusion. It becomes real because you make it real. If you see it from the perspective of it being an illusion, now you can bring life where there appears to be death. And anywhere there is pain, there is a sense of dying of something. And the pain reminds us that something is dying. Life is draining from it. So it is up to you, the giver of life, to bring restoration to it. That is not an easy task. That is not something that you're going to necessarily embrace today and to be done tomorrow. As Evelyn said at the onset of our questions today, it is something you grow into. And growing into it is not so much a growing up. It is a ripening. It is a maturation process. And the maturation process has nothing to do with you growing in terms of physicality, but it has everything with you becoming more aware of the power and essence of your being. The life source that you are. And when you are able to see that you are not your mind is yours, and your mind must be governed by you. And when you can govern it to the extent that it focuses on life and not the issue that presents itself as being an obstacle or an adversary to life, when your mind shifts from that to light, it is at that point that we're able to be the essence of what we were created to be. And when we are that, we are an asset to everyone at the same time, be they next door or be they in China. It doesn't matter. We become an asset and a powerhouse to humanity itself. Any questions or comments?
I had a few thoughts as you and Barbara was talking, and going back to Charles' question, well, two of Charles' questions, one with prayer and the other one with forgiveness, and we talked about praying for forgiveness. And thinking about what that forgiveness is essentially letting go of the barrier that we have placed between ourselves and another, or whatever that person, place, thing, object may be, that barrier that we have constructed between the two of us. It is simply removing that barrier, or more so letting the barrier, not even removing the barrier, but just letting the barrier go. And it made me think about when Evelyn brought up earlier to set the direction of your intent and just be. What that also involves is that idea of the piece of paper, the idea of the transformation that we're talking about, how we have been dealing with all along, of holding on to who and what we thought ourselves to be. And that in itself being the main, I don't want to say thing, keeping us from, but that is the more so the obstacle of what needs to be worked through in terms of realizing what and who we are, is letting go of who and what we thought we were, and the identity of ourselves that we continue to hold on. And so it's more so, even in this prayer, is more so of a letting go. It is more so of a allowing my self to be more. It is allowing myself to be anything that this piece of paper can turn into. Is allowing myself to to go swiftly through all the different forms of water, so to speak, as needed, and in doing so, discovering myself in different ways. And of course, emotion is involved in this, as I think Pastor Richard or Miss Barbara mentioned in regards to the forgiveness. And yes, it does become easier, but the emotions themselves are not bad. The emotions of themselves, used the correct way, is a tool to learn more about yourself and to then go further. I'm finished. It was a lot of stuff that I was thinking about. I didn't write it down, but I'm finished.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Pastor?
So,
Uh-huh.
Oh. Okay, I yield, whoever that was.
Oh, I see
Go
that.
ahead. I think I heard someone else.
I yield.
So, I always wondered I always said that this life, why am I here? Is this how life's supposed to be? But tell me if I'm wrong. The illusion that I'm living in is necessary. Am I correct with that?
Sure.
Because it's helping me to go back to beginning. Not the beginning, but beginning. And I see now that how necessary it is for me to live what I'm living now so I can get back there, if that makes sense. And I know it's a continual process. I'm done.
Yeah, Pastor Richard.
Yes.
Yeah, and everyone. What I'm hearing in my spirit, is the concept that we talk about water. And when I say water, I mean I'm receiving tears of joy in terms of, what I believe Evelyn is seeking. And Pastor, what I would like to do is, I know that we're off next week, but I think to go back and look at beginnings when we can talk about, the essence of our ancestral lineage, when we can look at the importance of what water means. And I think to look at that in terms of the waters of none, and we talk about it in terms of beginning, but it's just on my heart, that I would, like to, share, my thoughts and my vision about that as I too search for beginning, as Evelyn is speaking. And I know that we are Elohim having a human experience, but I think that it's something that I would like to just, bring out in the macro, as far as a point of beginning, to really talk about what does it really mean when we talk about what existed before existence began, and we're talking about energy and what that water is in terms of not just the H2O, but the substance and the matter of what that is. So I just wanted to put that out in the macro, and again, as I see it, in terms of how we may perceive what we're hearing, in the audio, but I think that in the spirit, again, the answers are there, because everything, God is everything, and everything is God. Energy is everything, and energy is the spirit. So I just wanted to share that thought, because I just got to meditate and pray on that, but I truly believe that is something that we need to discuss. I'm done.
And as it is with everything that we talk about, George, at some point you're going to we're going to discuss it. However, the opening of that will probably come from you, and we will explore that. And the reason it keeps coming up is because that is an assignment I do believe that Abum has granted. And at some point, you will indeed embrace it and will do it. However, you're speaking of the waters of noon and beginning in relationship to Evelyn's words as well as her tears speaks volumes, because just as the waters of beginnings are there, in the midst of those waters are all waters that flow and will ever flow, and her tears are waters that came from the beginnings of those waters, and her tears are the substance, not of pain, but the substance of joy for being able to see the essence of being who you're created to be, even if you cannot articulate it, even if there are times when you don't even feel like you are who you were created to be. It doesn't matter. Why? Because you were not created to be a feeling. You were created to be Elohim in this physical body. And your coming into this earth came through the waters of noon, embryonic fluids. So everything that's birthed has its origin or in the waters of beginnings. Therefore, it is necessary at some juncture for us to get a clearer understanding of the substance that is in the midst of the waters of noon. So, George, I thank you for bringing that up at this time, granting us privilege to join you and putting that in the macro. Anyone else or any questions about that? And let me say this, and I do forgive me for not explaining noon. There are those of you on the phone who may have not heard of the waters of noon. It is the Egyptian concept, or the Cushite concept of beginnings. And if you read the Cushite concept of beginnings, you read words like the waters of noon. You read things like Adum, coming from the beginning, the waters of noon. That is equal to Elohim. The story that George is referencing when it comes to beginnings is no different than the story that we are given in Genesis. It simply is a later rendition of an earlier writing. The later rendition is that in Genesis. The earlier writings of beginnings is found in the writings of the Cushite kingdom that were written in the tombs of Egypt. So, and it has been found on the scrolls of Egypt, which is a part of the Cushite kingdom. And as a result of having been in that Egyptian area, or Egypt itself, those understandings of beginnings were given to other groups of people, and when they embraced them, they wrote them down in different forms, even though all of them have the same meanings. And I hope that is clear enough for us to make the connection between what George is speaking to and what we are familiar with in the first chapter of Genesis. Thank you. Any questions or comments about? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Barbara. George brought in the aspect of water and Evelyn's tears, and I want to also look at it from the issue, because she said that something about, well, I need to get back to beginning. Evelyn, I want you to know your tears indicate you are already there. There's a guy by the name of Lao Tzu, TZU, who said if one is sick of sickness, then one is not sick. The sage is not sick because he's sick of sickness. Therefore, he's not sick. So if I'm sick of the illusion, which is what you said, you know that this is an illusion. If I'm sick of the illusion, then I no longer live in that illusion because I see it out there as separate from me, and that's not who I am. So the tears are of joy. I agree with George. That's what it is spiritually, because you understand that you are not the illusion. You're not living the illusion. So in a sense, set the direction of your intent and be. You are beginning because you see the illusion, if that resonates.
It does, Barbara. Thank you.
And let's be reminded that even though we think we have sometimes, or we don't even think about the idea or the concept, we are always at beginning. And that's what gives us the creativity that we are. What do I mean? It is only at beginning that you find a substance to create. So us being creators are always at beginning, creating a better world for everyone who lives in it. And I don't mean that in the classical sense of creating a better world in terms of materialism at all. I'm talking about a spiritual world with that everyone has access to without even having to gather themselves. I do believe that the reason we gather is because it is necessary for us to be reminded by each that we are at beginning, we are creators. However, the day will come when Elohim in this body realizes that bless you, that it is human, and understand that that it is not the animal that it presents itself to be. Once that takes place, then all of us will embrace the reality that we never left beginning. And it will never leave our thoughts again. And we won't have to focus on it because we are it. Questions, comments? I don't think that the last 2 days have been haphazardly haphazardly done. I don't believe for a moment that these questions were raised simply to have something to say or to fill time. I do believe that the universe is guiding us to a place of repose on the 25th, 26th, and 27th. And that place of repose is a renewing of our souls, our minds, our spirits, a renewing of everything that we are for the express purpose of bringing us to a place of revelation that is going to open our eye to see far beyond anything that we've ever seen before. And the questions that are being raised are questions of preparation for this and questions to get a deeper understanding of what we have been teaching so that we are able to sustain ourselves during this period of repose on the 25th, 26th, and 27th. So I solicit all the questions that you may have, not just for today, but tomorrow as well. And if Ron gets to his discussion on Esau, or ST gets to his discussion on Melchizedek, or I with this duality, if we get there, that's fine. If we don't get there until the period of after the that next weekend, or after our period of introspection, then that's when we do it. But the most important thing is that we address everything that presents itself to us at the moment that it does the presenting. And if it were not in keeping with the desires of Avun, then there would not be answers to the questions that are being raised and consolation for the hearts that are troubled. So having said that, I ask again if there are any questions or comments in regards to anything that we've said today, yesterday, or at any point, or anything that has crossed your mind or been brought to your attention. Questions, please, or comments.
Yeah, Pat, I just want to say that, I received something, from a mentee who told me, well, he wrote to me and said, God sometimes takes us through troubled waters, not to drown us, but to cleanse us. I know personally for myself, that I've gone through troubled waters, and I know it's not for the purpose, to be drowned, but to be cleansed. So I appreciate, all that I've heard today. I appreciate the spirit, of everyone, that is on the call. And I just want to just say to myself and to all of us, be encouraged, know thyself. And again, I just thank you for today's lesson teaching. I'm done.
You're quite welcome, but and I do thank each of you for your verbal response and the response of your presence. The presence of your energy is just as important a response as is the response to questions that are raised. And many times the questions that you have that you're not able to formulate, they are formulated by someone else, and we're well aware of that. And I want to thank you, because without your presence, those questions would not have risen in you. So, are there any questions that you would like to raise, or responses to anything that we've said? As George just made a response, it's available to you to do the same as well. There being none, then let us make preparation through our desires for what is to be presented tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And until then, it is my deep desire that not only do you walk in who you are, but you embrace everything that you are. With much love, respect, and desire, I bid you a great day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye, fam.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.